A dying KGB chief at a sanatorium. That's where the Soviet Empire's fate was decided. I'm Felix, and this is After the Fall. Under Brezhnev, corruption became total. Even some KGB members were selling information to the US. The Soviet people had huge hopes for Gorbachev. They saw him as a savior who would clean up the mess and lead the USSR into a new world. Sorry, but he wasn't. Andropov was the last real hope for the Soviet Union. He's one of the most underrated people in world history. If Andropov had lived 10 more years, the Soviet Union would never have collapsed. Under Stalin, privileges became a key tool for controlling officials. He gave them a material life ordinary people could only dream of. But if they opposed him, they could lose it all in an instant, or even end up in prison. Most officials obeyed him without question. In Yeltsin's autobiography, he wrote in detail about all these fancy privileges. They had private doctors, private sanatoriums, special department store counters, special schools, beautiful restaurants, palace-level feasts, comfortable transportation, all kinds of allowances, and so on. After Yeltsin became a candidate member of the Politburo, he got 3 chefs, 3 servers, a cleaning lady, a gardener, and a health supervisor. If he wanted a new suit, he just said the word, and a tailor would knock on his office door. On Women's Day, someone would bring him a list of gifts that could satisfy any woman, just pick whatever. Yeltsin said the first time he saw his dacha, he was shocked. He couldn't figure out how many bathrooms and washrooms there were. The dining table was 10 meters long, and the kitchen looked like a giant food processing plant. Back then, when a high official ZIL car hadn't even left the gate, every checkpoint along the way got a notice to clear the path, making sure the official got to his destination fast. Even the proletarian writer Gorky enjoyed aristocratic treatment. At his fancy villa, over 40 people worked just for him. When the French writer Roland visited him, he got super jealous. In his Moscow diary, he wrote, "A special communist privileged class has emerged in the USSR. They take honors, wealth, and money for themselves." Gorbachev didn't really go along with the privilege system, so everyone felt he wasn't one of them. That got him sidelined in the political scene. But luckily, Andropov had his back. In July 1978, his old boss Kulikov suddenly died. Andropov recommended Gorbachev to take Kulikov's spot in the Central Committee. He even complained publicly that some incompetent people were blocking Gorbachev from coming to Moscow. To push Gorbachev forward, he personally convinced Big Boss Brezhnev. On the 19th of September, 1978, they took a train to Baku so Andropov could check Gorbachev out in person. Andropov went all out for Gorbachev, but there was no personal benefit in it for him. He genuinely believed the country needed young, hands-on talent. The Politburo had too many old guys. The top level needed fresh blood. He always thought Gorbachev was the nation's hope. Mr. Andropov. Later on, Gorbachev really did become the nation's hope, but a hope for destruction, not renewal. Thanks to Andropov's efforts, in November 1978, Gorbachev, only 47 years old, was elected Central Secretary. He took over his old boss's work, handling agricultural issues. When he started chairing Secretariat meetings, some deputy ministers who sat in on them came back excited and said, "Oh my God, we finally have someone smart and honest who cares about the country and is determined to do something." By then, 23 years had passed since Gorbachev graduated from university and left Moscow. But when he came back, he wasn't the same young man anymore. On the 10th of November 1982, 76-year-old Brezhnev took too many sleeping pills and died in his sleep at his villa. Andropov took over as General Secretary of the Soviet Communist Party. Brezhnev ran the USSR for 18 years, second only to Stalin in length of rule. He also kept Stalin's model. He scrapped Khrushchev's system of rotating officials, which was set at the 22nd Party Congress. Instead, leadership positions became appointive and for life. Before, an official would usually stay in one post for about 3 years. Now they stayed for over 20 years. At the 23rd Party Congress, the re-election rate hit 90%. Everyone kept their job, except those who died. The number of bureaucrats grew 5 times under Brezhnev. In the Ministry of Industry alone, there was 1 full minister and 18 deputy ministers. Everyone wanted to be a bureaucrat. By 1980, the USSR, with a population of 220 million, had 18 million bureaucrats. This system created about 3 million privileged people. This stuck-in-place class resisted reform just to keep their special perks. Corruption got worse and worse. Under Khrushchev, official corruption was just isolated cases. Under Brezhnev, it became total. Brezhnev himself loved expensive gifts, luxury cars, and secretly owned 10 dachas. Officials got involved in smuggling grain and diamonds. Some even started selling party membership cards. In the 1970s, in some parts of Azerbaijan, party committee secretary posts, department heads, and management jobs had clear price tags. In Uzbekistan's Kashkadaya region, the first secretary of the regional party committee, Gaibov, personally sold positions at the district, city, and regional levels. Even some KGB members were selling information to the US. During Brezhnev's time, Even though the USSR's industrial output in 1975 reached over 80% of America's, and agricultural output reached 85%, the whole country had lost its faith. The economy started slowing down and stagnating from the late 1970s. The Foreign Ministry, Trade Ministry, Logistics Department, Light Industry Ministry, and Culture Ministry all saw theft of state property. The USSR was clearly showing serious signs of decay. Fu Cihua, the former Minister of Culture, took some materials meant for renovating the Bolshoi Theater to build her own dacha. When someone reported her, the Politburo held a meeting to criticize her. She got angry on the spot, stood up, and said, "What's there to blame me for? Look at yourselves." In this kind of political climate, the clear-headed Andropov took office. His first move was to crack down hard on corruption. Interior Minister Sokolov and Industrial Export Director Smilyakov had been greedy beyond measure during Brezhnev's time. When they searched Sokolov's property, they found 7 layers of expensive carpets and countless priceless paintings and antiques. Andropov had both of them executed by firing squad. From November 1982 to the end of 1983, Andropov dealt with over 90 officials at the minister level and 47 out of over 150 regional leaders. It shook the entire Soviet political scene. Brezhnev's son-in-law, Turbanov, used to be a regular cop. Because he was handsome, he married Brezhnev's daughter, Galina. In 10 years, he rose to become a colonel general and first deputy interior minister. He took bribes until his hands got tired. Andropov threw him in prison too. Later, under Chernenko, they managed to get him out. Under Gorbachev, they caught him and sent him back to jail. After he finished his sentence, he couldn't find a job and ended up as a boiler worker. Andropov was the most educated of all Soviet leaders. He also had the clearest mind. He's one of the most underrated people in world history. Not only did he launch an anti-corruption storm, but he also corrected the USSR's positioning in time. Brezhnev said the USSR had already developed socialism. But Andropov believed the USSR was just at the starting point of a long historical phase of perfecting developed socialism. By then, he had already spotted problems in Soviet agriculture. He started promoting the family contract system. He also loosened the controls on industrial construction, opposed to too much government interference in enterprises, and expanded enterprise autonomy. In 1983, both industrial and agricultural output surpassed 1,982 levels. Andropov was the Soviet Union's last hope. He keenly noticed the USSR's various problems and applied the right medicine. If Andropov could have lived 10 more years, the Soviet Union would never have collapsed. But Andropov only stayed in leadership for a bit over a year, from November 1982 to February 1984, before dying from long-term kidney disease. He was only 70 years old. Chernenko took over from Andropov. Mr. Chernenko, the Soviet Union's 6th leader, was the least noticeable one. He came from a poor background, joined the army to get ahead, and later became Brezhnev's chief of staff. He didn't have any outstanding victories or achievements. He mostly did grunt work for the Dnieper faction and handled propaganda. His main job was to hype Brezhnev up as a world-recognized leader and a great fighter for peace and human progress. But honestly, during his term, he didn't mess things up. He mostly agreed with Andropov's direction. He also stressed not to get into ideological fights and to focus on the economy first. He kept expanding the experiment with enterprise autonomy. Sure, he was mediocre, but he didn't cause chaos. He was mediocre for 13 months, then died. He took over as national leader in February 1984. By April, he had trouble speaking and breathing. Half a month before he died, they had to prop him up in his hospital bed for a TV interview. He died in March 1985 at age 74. From 1982 to 1985, from Brezhnev to Andropov to Chernenko, 3 national leaders died in 3 years. After that, an American newspaper ran a satirical cartoon. It showed a hospital room with a sign saying, Politburo, full of dying old men. A doctor touched one of their toes and said excitedly, "Hey, this one can still move. Okay, he's the general secretary." That was brutal. Nobody wanted to pick an old guy as the top Soviet leader anymore. They were scared of leaders dying. After going back and forth, to play it safe, they picked the youngest guy in the Politburo, Gorbachev, to be the boss. Andropov had been grooming Gorbachev to be his top successor. But nobody expected it would happen so fast. Gorbachev's main rivals at the time were the Moscow Party Secretary and the Leningrad Party Secretary, but they were both over 70. Nowhere near as safe as the 4-year-old Gorbachev. Plus, people were sick of another Brezhnev or Chernenko leaders with zero energy. But Gorbachev was different. He had great achievements in the regions. He was down to earth. He studied law at Moscow State University and agricultural economics at Stavropol University. Sure, he was half-bald, but at least he was handsome when he was young. In terms of education, political experience, people skills, even feng shui, he was the obvious choice for the next Soviet leader. The Soviet people had huge hopes for Gorbachev. They saw him as a savior who would clean up the mess and lead the USSR into a new world. Sorry, but he wasn't. Back then, only Andropov could have saved the USSR. Too bad Andropov died too early. What Gorbachev ended up launching wasn't a reform, it was a disaster. So yeah, young people, too impulsive. On the 11th of March, 1985, before the 3 p.m. Politburo meeting, Gorbachev had already made a deal with Gromyko. He promised to make Gromyko chairman of the Supreme Soviet if he got elected. Gromyko then stepped up as the one to propose Gorbachev for general secretary. He said Gorbachev was brilliant, knowledgeable, not stubborn like some people, put the party and the people's interests first, and had rich experience in party work. The other Politburo members chimed in, liked, and shared. At 5 p.m., the Central Committee plenum started. Gromyko spoke on behalf of the Politburo, saying they unanimously agreed on Gorbachev as general secretary. The room burst into applause, even louder than when Andropov was elected. Gorbachev stood up, smiled, and waved to everyone. But no one knew, from the moment Gorbachev stood up, the Soviet Union was already dead, for sure. Next time, we'll watch Gorbachev take the Kremlin and start the chain reaction that will shatter an empire. If you want to see the full picture, make sure you're subscribed.